This is part 2 of the Introduction to R video for STS 205. So in the last video, we went through section 2.2 of humanities data in R, and now we are going to go through section 2.3, and we're going to start working with RStudio. So we'll open up RStudio. I have it in my dock, but if you don't, you can go to Applications and find it there. And you'll notice that when we open up RStudio, we see the same information that we saw when we opened R in our command line. And so here we have the R prompt, and we can just go ahead and start doing math or whatever we want to do right here. So this is the equivalent of working in the command line. It's going to do the exact same thing. We can do the exact same things with it. So let's start where we left off before. So we're going to get our working directory. And you'll see by default, I'm in the root folder of my computer, just where I would have been had I opened a new terminal window. And we can actually interact with the command line right here in RStudio by going into terminal. And we can see pwd that we're in the same place. Now, let's say I want to change the working directory that I'm using in R. I want to use a different file to either look for data or write new files. So in my terminal, and I'm assuming that you all know how to do this already in a Finder window, so I'm just showing you how to do it in a terminal in case you don't want to leave RStudio. So if we see what we've got right here in the Emily directory, we can see we have this new file that we created in the last video. But I'm going to make a new directory. Mkdir is the command to make a new directory, and I'm going to call it R practice. So now when I do ls, I see I have this new practice, this new R practice directory, and I can go back to my console and I can set working directory. This is the command to set the working directory. And I'm going to put the path to that directory. So it's, I actually don't even need to be case sensitive here, although in R you generally do need to be case sensitive. So it's users, Emily, R practice, and now, oops. So again, I can use my up arrow and fix it. And so now my working directory is users Emily R practice. So if I were to write a new file, that's where it would go. So write more new text to a new file called another new file.txt. And if I come over here to my terminal, so I'm now going to navigate into this R practice folder, ls, I see I have this another new file.txt, which I can open. And it actually opened on my other monitor, but let's see, I can show you right here, and here it is, more new text. So I'm going to close that up, open this back. Okay, so going back to the terminal. So we are in RStudio working in the terminal. And so I'm going to go through section 2.3 here just to show you that it's basically the same as working in your command line. So in section 2.3, we're moving into vectors. So a vector is, as they tell us, a data structure containing a collection of multiple values with the same type. So you can have a vector of numbers, you can have a vector of text strings, but you can't mix different data types within the same vector. So the way to create a vector is with the C function, which stands for combine. So this is the C function, and the arguments that it takes are the objects that you want to, the values that you want to combine into a vector. So the example we have here is 1, 10, and 100. And what Arnold and Tilton do is they're creating a new variable, a new object called vecObj, and they're assigning it the value, these these values, this vector of 1, 10, and 100. And so we just hit enter, and again, it doesn't print, but we can see it by going like this. And as you'll see, RStudio wants to help us out. So as soon as I start typing the name of this variable, RStudio is trying to fill it in, which I can do just by hitting enter. So there I can see my, my variables. Or, I'm sorry, I can see the value of this vec_obj variable, which is the vector 1, 10, 100. And the class of vec_obj is numeric, and that's because all of the values in this vector are numeric. And Arnold and Tilden tell us that that this object is still numeric, just like the single number objects in the previous section, because for R, a single numeric value is a vector of length 1. So before, when we were saying x is equal to 3, it's the same thing as if we had said, and we'll call it something else, we'll call it y is equal to c3. So for R, these things are exactly the same, and the way we know that is we can ask, is x equal to y, and R will tell us that that's true. So anytime that you're working with kind of single numbers or text strings, you're actually working with a vector. And we can do math with vectors. So the example that we see in the book is vec_obj plus 10. And so what it's done is R has added 10 to every element of the vec_obj vector. And here's the next example that they give us. And this is the same thing as saying vec_obj times 2. So another thing that they point out is that what happens when we try to add vectors that are of different lengths. So here's the example. We have a vector that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we add a vector that's 100, 200. So as you can see, the first element of the second vector was added to the first element of the first vector. The second element of the second vector was added to the second element of the first vector. And then the next thing that happened was that the first element of the second vector was added to the third element of the first vector. So it just gives us the same thing as if we had said 6 plus the 100, 200, 100, 200, 100, 200. So it's the exact same thing. And as they tell us, we didn't actually have to type out all of these numbers to get this vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could have just done 1 colon 6, and it's going to give us the same thing. So we have a function. There are several functions that we can use to work with vectors, but one really useful one is the length function, which is going to tell us how many elements a vector has. So the length of vec_obj is 3. Remember, it was 1, 10, 100. We can also, if we go back to length x, it's 1, because the value 3 is actually a vector of length 1.